My question is quite serious, and I would like to address it to Oleksiy Semeniy, Director of the Institute of Global Transformations. I know your institute, but mainly Alexander Charles, who is not present today. Well, you discussed long ago the situation of European integration without membership. Let's stop that point that we don't have membership. And Mrs. Naniewska just mentioned that Medvedchuk failed, but for a while. So what they have in mind, they usually tell us that, right, they don't give you membership, and why do you have to fight for that? We just discussed here that institutions and laws are the main. They are keeping us on the path. But in any case, you expressed the opinion that we don't have to join any bloc. And do you insist on that? Do we have any chance to stay alone in this process? Because we never discussed this during this roundtable, but can you give some fresh water to this discussion?
If we're talking just about European integration and EU integration, we should make some diversification for Ukraine, because it's now a unique case for Ukraine. We could have European integration without any EU integration, because let's be frank, for the next 15 years there will be no EU membership for Ukraine. It's obvious, even for European Union members, we should say frankly. Then it's a question for Ukraine, what to do during these 15 years. It's not 1 or 2 years. And the choice of Ukraine is mostly supported is really to go forward in the direction of European Union. It's just the choice which are more and more supported by the majority. I had just a unique opportunity today in the morning. There was a dramatic, interesting discussion, just in kind of round table organized by the foundation of the former president of Ukraine, Mr. Kuchma, in Institute of International Relations. And it was just awards for young students, scientists, which wrote the thesis in favor and against of 3 options. Either EU integrations, or Eurasian integration, or just holding this non-bloc status as independent state. And according to the votes of these students' awards, approximately 56%, it was the students all around of Ukraine, mostly not from the western part of Ukraine, but mostly approximately from the central and eastern part of Ukraine. 56% voted in their arguments and choices for the EU integration. Approximately 1/3 voted for non-bloc and stay as it is, and approximately 10 or 15% for actually Eurasian integration. But what was for me very unusual, what I didn't expect, that I listened, and it was one part, and the jury, or the people who just asked the question, the most question came from Mr. Kuchma, but nevertheless the other people, they are key professionals, almost all ministers for foreign affairs previous of Ukraine and deputies of minister for foreign affairs, so people responsible for EU policy of Ukraine were present as the jury. But what was very interesting for me that the best arguments presented in favor of EU integration of Ukraine have been presented by the students, it's my perception, by the students who come from eastern and central Ukraine. Some people, as students from western Ukraine, it was much more like some just phrases about general cases which we can listen in TV or read in newspapers, but not in good argumentation. Good argumentation came exactly from the students, for example, from Kharkiv, from Lugansk, and others. And coming back to your question, just some kind of difficult choice, because mostly, if you now, let's be open, if you now ask the people, okay, we support this or that choice, but why do you support this or that choice? In the case of European Union integration, the most obvious answer from the people would be probably the following ones. Firstly, just social economic standards, because any of the people who could have traveled to the European Union countries, they could see by their own eyes what are the living standards, what are the salaries, what are the pensions. But that's an argument for them. Secondly, it's just traveling without visas all around the European space. This is quite a good argument as well. And then, probably to some, there is probably a small part, it's just European integration, or EU integration is just an antonym for having some deals with Russia. So there are some people who the best choice is back and against from Russia. If we take just economically, and it was told by His Excellency Heim that for the first period of implementation of DCFTA, there will be, and it's just now obvious because a few years ago it was just a Polish secret, and nobody wanted from the side of either EU or those who are in favor of European integration of Ukraine to talk about some losses, economic losses, which we should confront with after implementation. Now it's very often said, okay, in first years probably you would suffer or you should suffer, but you should suffer in the sake of the future some probably profits. And this is actually the question, because economically now the situation all around the world and in Europe is the following. You could calculate only for short-term perspective. Even for mid-term perspective, just from scientific point of view, you can not calculate definitely what happens. And for short-term perspective, we can definitely calculate that Ukraine will suffer. And for mid-term and long-term perspective, there is only some options or variants. But nevertheless, the association agreement should be signed, because it's much more now not about, for us, not about economy, but about some political and geopolitical issues which are quite important for us. But if coming back to the issue, why should we suffer? Probably because we have no other choice. Because theoretically it could be a choice staying neither in, economically, neither in the sphere of EU nor in the sphere of Russia. But it could be only the choice in the case if we Ukrainians are quite strong enough to develop ourselves to some standards, to promote reforms, to be successful. And let's speak honestly, in the last 20 years we were mostly unsuccessful. And I'm
sorry, but let me interrupt you. You didn't answer my question, so you changed your mind as far as I understand, because you look pro-EU or pro-European at least. So you change your mind. So we don't, if we, in any case, not to lose our time and efforts, I told that 1 hour and a half ago that we invest our efforts and time, which is precious for every one of us. We invest them to help the government, that's my opinion, of Ukraine and the governments of European member states to decide positively on signing the agreement. But there are some opinions that we don't need any agreement. Well, we suffer, but let's not suffer. Can you tell me openly whether this opinion is taking place anymore, or this is just to close the question or to open new discussion? For example, next discussion will be Ukraine has neutral status, like you told 10 years ago.
Just to be clear, and I'll reiterate once more. If we talk about association agreement or signing association agreement, I support the signing of association agreement due to different methods. But if we talk just theoretically, from my perspective, what I would like for my country, just from many points of view, I would prefer Ukraine as probably a good, strong state to be neither in EU nor in some Russia-linked bloc, because we are not too small to be the part of one of the blocs. We could play the game. Unfortunately, beforehand, we had no example that Ukraine actually could play this game, but probably in future we can be successful and nevertheless play the game. But once more, this is a definition, because now it's mostly just 100%. Either you support the signing of association agreement, and it means that you are in favor of EU membership of Ukraine. In my case, it's not. It's not the case. I support the signing of association agreement, but nevertheless, I doubt whether Ukraine needs to be a member of EU. Because what we now look at, what is going inside the EU. Because EU is not just what is, if you do know, Mr. Heim, it was the discussion in the beginning of the 90s about some models, mostly promoted by Germans, for example, Europa à la carte, circles, and now it's just exactly the case. We have inside the EU the circles. In the center, some lead blocks, then around the center, and then on the margins. And for me, as for Ukraine, for example, it would be the question, why should I enter the whole block if I actually, with association agreement, I have the possibility to pick up what I need and probably to give something as, okay, queer example of diplomacy, but I don't need to be fully associated with the EU as a member, because if I am a member, I'm just obliged to do everything within this membership. If I'm not a member, I could change my mind, I could choose. So it's just, from diplomatic point of view, it's just an equal partner if I'm not a member, and not an equal partner if I'm a member.
Well, thank you very much for the point. Amanda Paul has her comment about it.
Okay, I just wanted to make one comment in response to what you just said. I mean, in the case of Ukraine, I mean, frankly speaking, okay, the membership would be very nice, but it's not really about the membership, it's about the process. It's about the fact that hopefully the association agreement and the DCFTA can actually stimulate a proper reform process in Ukraine that's going to modernize the country. Because, I mean, what you said about how it would be possible to stay neutral in between, not being part of one process or the other, I mean, frankly speaking, I think this would just be a disaster for Ukraine. I mean, Ukraine has been sort of living in this middle space for the last 20 years, and we can see, I'm sorry to say, I mean, I love this country, but the development of this country, I mean, where is it at after 20 years? I don't think we've seen any sign of any capacity yet from most of Ukraine's political elites to drive forward the transformation of this country by themselves. I mean, Ukraine's political elites, again, I'm sorry if this is going to be a bit provocative, have been more interested in driving forward their own interests than that of the country. I think this is a fact. So I would hope actually that the process of European association could help change things in this country, which would be beneficial to society and improve their lives. Whether or not it results in membership at the end of the day is another question. But as I said, the journey to get there is crucially important, and it's something that Ukraine really desperately needs. The EU needs to help Ukraine help itself, I would say.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amanda. Well, I would like to have one remark about economy. In fact, while working in the Ministry of Economy, I had a choice. I had a case when some chemical enterprise wanted, well, quite a big amount of money. And when we tried to calculate and to decide about that case, whether they need that money, that was more or less $80 million in hryvnia, suddenly. So I asked them, what do you want with that $80 million? They say, we want to support this, well, definitely very outdated technology. But they say we want to support 2,000 people working in that factory. I asked, what is the salary? The salary was less than $200. And I said, well, why don't you create on that money, if you get them, purely new, with new technology factory, and possibly you will not have 2,000 people, but you will have 300 or 400 people, but with good salary, with good technology and good future. So why I mentioned that point, that at that time it was rejected, but usually even the government, even the budget finances those outdated enterprises. And what we talk about the cost, Mr. Ambassador, the cost sometimes is painful, but sometimes you need that pain to get rid of that very, very old factory, because the other cases they don't give the chance. So maybe let's look at that positively, like surgery. So sometimes you have to have a surgery instead of therapy, which does not give you healing. Well, I would like to before.
May I just sort of reply very briefly on what has been said? Well, I'd just like to follow up on that, because I think one has to try to be realistic. I think any Ukrainian politician who understands how the European Union works would be in favor of European integration and membership. Because membership for Ukraine under the existing framework and rules that we have would mean that there would be billions and billions of euros annually going into structural reform, going into agriculture, and this, I think, would transform Ukraine in a short time. Now, as I say this, Austria, I think, is not happy to discuss Ukrainian European membership in the short term. I would not say 15 years, I should not say 10 years, but I think this is not what we are talking about now. I think this is a step-by-step approach, and reforms, I think, cannot be avoided by claiming membership. I think that's as clear as that. But for me, I think it's difficult to understand that anybody who is in favor of European integration, approximation, says, well, we want to do the bits and pieces. We'll take, sushi and sashimi as we like it, but not the whole thing. I think this is a clear misunderstanding of what the association agreement offers, because this, after all, is a very comprehensive, political, and deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, which covers not only goods and services, but all mechanisms into more tricky questions like dispute settlement and so on. So what is negotiated, however, is the terms of application. So, and I think this is when we talk about costs, we have certain periods where transformation is either supported or possible. And if I look at some sectors and some regions, and if I just want to give you one example, I've been driving around the country a lot, and if you think of any business in between Lviv and Ivano-Frankivsk, and if you've seen that road, 100 kilometers, and this is the main road, recently, then any business who is globally competitive and doing well would have a lot of pain to do business from where they are, because there's nothing left of what used to be a road, and I think you cannot be competitive and globally successful on that basis. So it's not so much about individual things. I think it's about the whole setting. We talk about infrastructure in physical terms, in social, educational, and other ways. So I think this just as a response to what you've said. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, Oleksiy, for helping to increase the temperature of the discussion. And I would like to have a question, whether we have here people who are against signing an association agreement. Could you raise your hands, please? Well, we have. Do you understand that that's not bad to be against the association agreement? That's just the different opinion. Well, so much more thanks to you, because you increase this temperature, because you give us the opportunity to see the other side, which we don't see here, but we see it in other situations when we see our opponents. But sometimes they are not opponents; they are just not well-informed people. So please.
Just a few answers probably to your remarks. Firstly, you talked about EU membership of Ukraine, and if, for example, Ukraine for now were EU member or was EU member, billions of euros would have been invested according to all the plans. My answer is quite short for you. You don't have these billions to be invested to Ukraine, if even the Ukraine were the member. First, we can see these cases of Cyprus, of Greece. Ukraine is much more larger. To invest to Ukraine according to all your standards, for example, for agriculture and any other facilities, especially infrastructure, you can take Poland, approximately equal to Ukraine. The amounts would be tens of billions. And EU, unfortunately, does not have this capacity. You have had this capacity in the 90s, but now no more. And then probably once more. And the second one is just a strategic, and I forgot it to tell. We are talking about all this probably membership perspective or EU integration and some cardinal push for Ukraine to make reforms. I agree, we need reforms. We needed at the beginning of the 90s, we needed that. But what is the case? For example, we signed something, now association agreement. We signed DCFTA with clear provisions set for both sides. And then what will happen? On the EU side, you will go forward with all these provisions using all these elements. What I doubt, and this is the case of Ukraine, and it is proved by our reality for all 20 years of independence of Ukraine, we will not mostly use all these facilities, we will not reform ourselves successfully, and then in this case, all the benefits, or mostly the benefits from DCFTA will be gained by the EU and not so by Ukraine. Because in order to gain some benefits, we need to do something. We need to do reforms. And previous experience of Ukraine, science obviously, we are not very eager to do reforms. Much more about talking. This is the reality.
Ambassador?
Very briefly, not on the second part, but on the first part, I think if I spend too much time in Ukraine, I would really start to get worried about the European economy. If I believe what I read and what some people say. I think one needs to point out that the budget of the European Union and its institutions is a minimal part of the European GDP. It's roughly 1%. 1%. At the same time, we've just more or less agreed on the budget for the next 6 years. And if we look at these figures, then we have a clear legal base. And if we look in hindsight, there have been funds that are not allocated on a discretionary basis to certain member states, but there is a clear legal framework and structural programs in regional and agricultural policy, most of all, if you look at the big numbers. And these imply that you have millions, and not of investments, but of budget means that are in the programs allocated to countries who are able to absorb these funds. Poland has been perfectly able to absorb tens of billions of euros within the European Union budget.
From the beginning?
Yes, from the beginning. And certainly now. Other countries may not have been able to do that, but still there is the money out there. In similar ways, this applies to Ukraine. A lot of money is standing and waiting to be absorbed without membership at this stage. And they have not been absorbed, and they have not been accumulated in the way that they could have been. But let me just assure you that there's no need to worry about the European economy, even if it is in recession, and certain parts of the European Union are in recession. I think Europe as a whole is still a market that is extremely attractive in terms of any business or any economy like the Ukrainian developing economy that has a small fraction of the income that any European member state, I think, has an offer, even the ones in crisis or even the ones that are not as developed as most Central European or Western European countries. And I think this is something that, on the other hand, can be seen as a reason why it is overly difficult to discuss at the very minute with the existing rules and regulations and budgets that have been more or less decided up until 2020 to include large new candidates and member states and not yet candidates I think this is why we talk about a very long-term process, exactly because the European Union is a very rules-based project, and it would be difficult to even modify completely the budget period from 2021 to 2026 without taking into consideration a bit of the history and the traditions. That much, I think, for that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador. I really like what you say, not only the figures or the explanations which you have, but the emotion. Usually I tell you, when we have European experts coming here, they start from crisis, and they talk like they talk in their academic institution, that look, we have a crisis and everything is very bad, and unemployment is such and such, the decrease is such and such. In fact, that what you explain is really needed for us, and we don't have studies about what is European Union, even with the decline, for example, for 10 years, minus 1%. What does it mean? So if we got a decline 17%, and then next 5 years we have 3%, then it means we come back to what we have had 5 years before. So, but everybody forgot that we had declined 70%, and we discussed we have a growth, but Europe has a decline. So that's fine. Thank you very much for that.